Heidi and I have a daughter, well, we've got three, but we have one who is, I can't remember, 32 or 33, born in 87, so you can work that out. And she's unmarried. And been praying for some years now for a husband for her. Do you know that a father can tell a daughter that she's loved, but it takes a husband to tell a daughter, to tell a woman she's lovely. They're two different things. And no matter how much I have spoken over my daughter over the years that you are lovely, you are lovely, you are lovely, doesn't mean much. It means a lot when I tell her she's loved. That gives her a sense of assurance and a security, but being told you are loved and being told you are lovely are two very different things. And it takes the father to say to the child you are loved, but it takes the spouse to say to that person you are lovely. And the father can never fill that void to be told you are lovely. So I've been praying for my daughter for some years now for a husband. And because it's been desperate, and she is made, as every woman is made by God, for some man to say you are lovely. I've seen that void in her soul. And the beginning of this year, we've been praying that for some years now, and she'd probably be horrified that I'm sharing this story. But at the beginning of this year, I had this urge to take this prayer to another level. And I remember sometime in January, before God saying, Father, you are preoccupied with finding a spouse for your son, and I am preoccupied for finding a spouse for my daughter. And so, Father, I'm appealing to you on that understanding, on that basis that you are so desperate for this bride for your son. I am desperate for a husband for my daughter. Please provide one. And I prayed that prayer intensely for 2 weeks. And I said, Father, bring a man, as I have told my daughter you are loved, bring a man who will tell my daughter she's lovely. I prayed that for about 2 weeks intensely, and then I just went back to my normal intensity of praying that prayer. In November last year, she had a puncture on the freeway in Johannesburg at night, and some guy in November stopped to help her change the wheel. Of course, the spare was flat. So he stayed with her until, I don't know, somebody else arrived, and then he said goodbye. And that was the end of that. In January, my daughter puts a message in the Edenvale News just wanting to thank the Good Samaritan who stopped to help her. That guy's mother sees the thing in the newspaper, says, didn't you stop and help a young lady? Yeah, he said, that lady said thank you in the newspaper. He gets hold of the newspaper, asks for my daughter's number. Phones up my daughter, says, can I have coffee? At this stage, every wall in my daughter's soul is put up to defend herself from being hurt. Her first response is, no. She thought after, no, I'll have this cup of coffee. Cut a long story short, I get a phone call a month ago. A very nice young man, 38 years of age, asking if he may court my daughter. Lovely Christian boy. I said to him these things. First of all, are you a Christian? Yes, he is. I said to him, hey, buddy, I just got some things here. One, have fun. Well, too many of guys courting these days make it so serious. Just enjoy it, laugh, have fun. But I said to him, don't ever mess with my daughter's soul. He said to me, no, sir, I won't do that. He said, I find your daughter lovely. Isn't that beautiful? And the reason I share that, guys, is that there is something in a parent's soul that aches desperately when we see our children living unfulfilled. There is something inside us that aches when we see our children living anything less than what they're meant to, than what their potential is. You all know what I'm saying. I had a conversation with my son a couple of years ago because he's clever. He got an A for maths and an A for art in matric, so he's got a brain on his head. But he failed his first 6 months at university. I sold my car to pay his varsity fees. Serious. I could not believe this clever boy failed. I had a chat with him. It was a gentle chat. I can't remember what I said, but I should have taped it because something changed. And if I had taped that thing and turned it into a book, I'd be really wealthy now. Because I didn't clap him, I didn't yell at him. I said something that got to his soul. And he finished his CA last year. And we just heard on Friday that he passed his board exam. How good is that? So with my daughter, there was this ache in my soul. You are made for more than this. And I had to get before God and say, Father, you have made my daughter for more than this. And my heart is aching and grieved. It's like she's living below par. With my son, it was not so much I was grieved, I wanted to smack him because he wasted my money. But still there was this pain that I wanted to transfer into his heart and give him the pain to carry. You are living below what God made you for. Does that make sense? And I wonder, because all of us who are parents will relate to that story. And all of you who can't, one day you will. But I wonder what God feels in his heart. Because we serve a God with emotions. I wonder what he feels in his heart when he looks at your life and mine and he says, I made you for so much more. I wonder what God felt when he watched the Israelites come under Moses right to the land of Canaan, send over the spies, and then go back into the wilderness for another 38 years. I wonder what the heart of God felt as he watched them go back into the wilderness, knowing they would wander and die for 38 years. It's like, I made you for more than this. One of my favorite worship songs that I sing as I prepare to preach or prepare for anything is that beautiful song we sang a while back. There must be more than this. Spirit of God, I wait for you. Remember that song? There must be more than this. Oh, breath of God, come breathe within. Is there something inside of us? It's like our intercession is so often, God, there must be more of you. And it's not, hey, God, you're not very much, you know. It's not in who he is. We sing that in our experience of him, in our desire for him. It's like, Lord, you are so infinite and I experience so little. There must be more for me to experience. But I wonder if God ever looks up from heaven at you and I and says, there must be more than this. I wonder if God ever looks at our offering and says, yeah, there must be more than this. I wonder if he ever looks at church attendance on Sunday and says, gee, there must be more than this. I wonder if he ever looks at the space in our hearts for devotion and says, there must be more than this. I wonder if he ever looks at how we're living and what we're doing and the state of our achievement and says, but there must be more than this. I made you for more than this. And we're singing, God, there must be more than this. And he's looking down and says, there must be more than this. I made you for more than this. So I'd like to this morning look at 3 characters from the Bible. One of them, you'll get it. And the first one is Eli. And we find the story in 1 Samuel and chapter 3. And you know the background to the story is that Eli is the priest. He's an old man. He's in his 90s. And Samuel is this little boy of about 10 years old who's serving in the temple. By the way, this has got nothing to do with age. It's got to do with the youthfulness of our soul. I've seen 95, I haven't. I've seen 80-year-old men, far more energetic, youthful, powerful, able to hear God in spirit than 20 years old. Got nothing to do with physical age. Please hear this. But you've got these two characters, this little boy and who's now serving in the temple, and you've got this old man. 1 Samuel chapter 3 says this: the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord in the presence of Eli. That's the picture in the temple. It says, the word of the Lord was rare in those days, and there was no frequent vision. Does that sound like a church that's going through revival? That sounds like a church that's going through all the motions. You see, all the sacrifices were taking place with Eli. It looked from the outside like it's all good. It said the lamp hadn't gone out. So in other words, all the sort of temple stuff was taking place, but there wasn't God. And Eli, this priest who was teaching the word, no longer heard it. Here comes this little boy, 10 years old, and he hears God call him by name one night. Samuel, Samuel. He rushes to Eli. Eli says, I never called you. Go back to bed. Second time, Samuel, Samuel. He rushes to Eli. He said, here I am. You called. He says, I didn't call you. Go back to bed. Third time, Samuel, Samuel. He rushes to Eli. Eli discerns that God is speaking to him. Eli says to Samuel, go back, and the next time you hear that voice, say, speak, Lord, your servant is listening. You know the story, hey? Can I tell you the difference between Eli and Samuel? Samuel hears a voice he doesn't understand. Eli understands a voice he doesn't hear. Let me say that again, friends. Samuel hears a voice he doesn't understand. Eli understands a voice he no longer hears. Eli is able to disciple somebody to hear the voice that he no longer hears. Eli is able to instruct as an expert somebody else into something he no longer experiences. It's incredible, guys. That we can, in our faith and our experience of God, become such experts. We can disciple people to really do well in God. And we never ever go there ourselves. Scary thought, eh? Scary thought. We can stand up and lead wonderful songs and take the whole congregation into the presence of God, and we ourselves, no presence of God, just sing well. And we can preach fantastic sermons that God speaks to people. And people leave the meeting and say, God spoke to me, but the guy who preached never heard a thing. Just experts. Because God's word has life of itself. It doesn't need you and I. The thing with Eli, dear friends, is that Eli looked back to his glory days, and Samuel looked forward. And dear friends, if your glory days in God, if your miracles and your, wow, God spoke, wow, I sensed God, wow, God touched me, are all behind you, it's time for some serious change. Let me take you to another man. We go to Moses. These guys were all old chaps. We go to Moses, and we pick up the story in Exodus chapter 33 and 34. At this stage, Moses has brought the Israelites out of Egypt, performed all those plagues, all those miracles. He's got this magic walking stick. He can make it a snake when he wants, bring it back to a walking stick. It's like he's met God at the burning bush. He's performed all these plagues. Frogs, mosquitoes, all that stuff. You've seen it all. He's watched the firstborn of Egypt die. He has stood at the Red Sea and held out his staff and parted the waters. He's put his staff back over the waters and they closed, and he watched the entire army of Egypt drown. He has struck a rock with his staff and water flowed out of it. He has called out to God and guinea fowl fell from the sky. He has seen some miracles. He has seen some glory. And Israel found themselves in Exodus chapter 33 and 34 at a difficult place. And Moses gets before God. He doesn't pray for, God, can you change the menu? Lord, can you give us sparkling and not still? He doesn't pray, Lord, we've had enough guinea fowl now. Can you change the menu? Can you give us beef, not chicken, so that these guys will be happy? He doesn't pray for any of that stuff. He doesn't pray for a new building. Doesn't pray for better leaders. Doesn't pray for a better facility. Doesn't pray for any of that stuff. After all that he has been through and all that he sees of God, and they need to move forward, he says, God, show me your glory. His prayer in this incredible situation where they are desperate for a breakthrough, and they are sick and tired of the water, and they are sick and tired of quail, and they are sick and tired of the cereal they have to eat every morning, is, God, don't change the menu. God, show us your glory. And if there would be something inside of us like Moses, who after having seen so much of God's glory, it's like none of us have seen what Moses saw, guys. None of us have parted a sea. None of us have seen the miracles that he performed. And yet there's still this longing. God, there is more of you. Show me your glory. And we need to break this out of this place where we're stuck. We need to move forward, God. And it's not about all these things. It's about your glory with us. There are times when I've prepped for a meeting and I've gone somewhere and I feel like God is saying, preach a message that calls them onward. There are times I feel like God is saying, preach a message that calls them inward. There are times I feel like God says, preach a message that calls them together. And there is a moment like today when I feel like God is saying, call them upward. Call them upward. And we sang that beautiful song about our eyes on the sky. What's God's response to this plea of Moses? God, show me your glory. I'm quite taken aback by God's response, because we read in Exodus chapter 34, God says to him, be ready in the morning and come up in the morning up to Mount Sinai and present yourself there to me. Those are quite formal words, aren't they? Be ready in the morning, come up the mountain and present yourself there to me. It's very formal. I looked up did a bit of research on that phrase. And if you look at this phrase, present yourself, it's generally an official sort of occasion. And it's generally somebody presenting themselves to somebody in authority over them to receive an instruction. It's not two mates hanging together. It's not, hey, bro, come chill with me. It's like, look, it's the guy with the authority wanting to give an instruction saying, present yourself. That's the occasion. See, God didn't just say to Moses, hey, buddy, tomorrow, I know you want to see my glory. That's such a lovely prayer. Tomorrow, if you've got some time, you've got a moment in your schedule, just trundle up the mountain and we'll have a chat and I'll show you some glory. It was not a request from God to Moses if he could find the time. It was a command from God to Moses. You have an appointment with me. Prepare yourself for it. Focus on it. Give attention to it and come. And I want to say, dear friends, that in terms of our devotional life, in terms of our worship, our reading of His Word, and in terms of our praying, something needs to grip us, that there is a bit of formality with this thing, that we don't just chill with God, we don't just trundle along if we've got some spare time, but we present ourselves to the living God. You know, the incredible thing is that in that moment, God was about to bring a revelation of Himself that had never been given in history. It was an intimate revelation. It was a exceptional revelation. It was a personal revelation. But God still said, hey, buddy, I want you to focus on this thing. This thing needs to be a priority to you. And then we know how Moses goes up the mountain. And do you remember that in Exodus chapter 3, when God first appeared to Moses, Moses said, who are you, Lord? And he said, he said, I am. Remember that? In Exodus chapter 3, God revealed Himself by name. I am. And that's, guys, can I just linger a minute there? That's an incredible thing, for God to reveal Himself by name as I am. Because the meaning of I am is that I am the self-existent one. Dear friends, the one thing that separates every single being human being, demonic being, angelic being, or Star Wars being if there is one. The only thing that separates every single being from God is that every being of every realm is created and God is self-existent. You and I stand before God, dear friends, as the roast potato stands before the chef. You and I stand before God, dear friends, as the bran muffin sits on the table in front of the baker. That's how we stand. I don't know if you get that. I don't know where you are at in your relationship with God. I don't know what you think about yourself. But in terms of that revelation, God being self-existent and you being created, you are a bran muffin. And you stand before the baker. And what can you do? And what can you say? There is no comparison. You put anything you want on that, what did I say? Brown muffin. You put anything you want on that brown muffin, it can never compete with the baker. This whole new age thing that we are gods, what a load of rubbish. Anyway, so Moses has this revelation of the name of God. But this time, it's the nature of God. First time in the Bible, first time in history that God reveals his nature. He says, I am the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger and abounding in love and truth. Go and do yourself a favor, study those 5 things. It's the first time God reveals his nature. The Lord, the compassionate. That speaks of God's tenderness. The Lord, the compassionate and gracious. That word grace means to stoop. It's literally what it means. It means to stoop. It's a picture of somebody in high authority bending down to lift up somebody with no authority. The Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger. I love that word. It literally means to take a long breath. I'm patient with some things and really impatient with others. My wife has this little phrase that she says to me, which generally increases the impatience for a brief moment, and then I realize she's right. She goes, breathe. At the border post, breathe. At immigration, breathe. At the place where you renew your driver's license, breathe. If she's not there, I tend to cause a scene. Sorry, I just do. But I love this picture of God because it basically says, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God who takes a long breath. Isn't that good? It's like you and I know what we're capable of, hey? And we feel like we really mess it up, and God just goes over you and our lives. Isn't that a beautiful picture? It's like he's not fussed when you and I mess up. He just takes a long breath. Abounding in love and truth. I looked up the synonyms of the word abound, and because I have a very limited vocabulary, and these are the synonyms of the word abound. Cascade, flood, deluge, inundate, overwhelm. He cascades over us. Isn't that incredible? He cascades with his love. He inundates us. He drenches us. He deluges us with his love. The last word he speaks of is truth. And the word meant there is not truth as in fact, but truth as in foundation. Isn't that beautiful? It's not, he doesn't reveal himself as we can know a fact, but he reveals himself as we can build on his foundation. So I ask you this morning, I love this thing of Moses. He's had this incredible encounter of God. He's had more revelation of God than anybody on the planet. He's seen miracles that you and I dream of, and yet there's still this longing for more of God. Show me your glory. And that's how God reveals himself. The Lord, the compassionate and gracious God who takes long breaths and cascades with love and stability. That's your God this morning. Take you to the number 3 guy. And let's look at John in the book of Revelations. Now, if you look at John's life, in Revelation chapter 1, John is about 95 years old. He's the guy that had walked with Jesus. He's the guy that was nicknamed the disciple who Jesus loves. How many of you know that's a cool nickname? You know that? How many of you, Peter and John and Judas and all those, they must have been so miffed. Hey, Peter, would you come here? Hey, whatever. Judas, come here. Hey, the one that I love, come here. He was a special boy. There were so many wonderful encounters he had of Jesus. He was the one where Jesus said, I want you to look after my mom. Mom, you have a new son. That's a very intimate, deep thing that played out right there. And here John is. He's now 95 years old. That took place 60 years previously. He's on an island, the island of Patmos. And if it's still called Patmos, by the way, you can go look at it on Google Maps. It doesn't look like a nice place. But actually, it does look quite nice if you were there on holiday. It doesn't look like a nice place if you were there in prison. And anyway, so he's on this island all alone for his faith. He's got this. 60 years ago, I walked with Jesus. 60 years ago, I watched Jesus. I watched Jesus ascend into heaven. Literally, I just watched him rise. I mean, he's had some encounters, hasn't he? In Revelation chapter 1, it says, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. And can I say, dear friends, that perhaps everything that takes place is the result of those couple of words. I was in the Spirit. It's not a spooky thing, guys. It's not a weird thing. It's just to be in the presence of God. He says, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard a loud voice behind me. And I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me, and I saw one like a son of man. He was clothed with a long robe and had a golden sash around his chest. The hairs on his head were white, like white wool, like snow. It says his eyes were like a flame of fire, and his feet were like burnished bronze refined in the furnace. It said his voice was like the sound of many waters, and in his hand he held 7 stars, and from his mouth came a sharp, two-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in full strength. And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. Here is a man who has experienced so much. Here is a man who has been closer to Jesus in the physical realm probably than any other human. And at the age of 95, he has an encounter, he has an experience, he has a revelation that is deeper, more overwhelming, more convincing, and has more impact to the planet than anything he's had in the past. Never once does John fall at the feet of Jesus as though dead until this moment. I want to say to you, dear friends, doesn't matter what you have seen, doesn't matter what you have experienced, there is an encounter with God in front of you that should exceed and overwhelm and diminish everything you've had in the past. And will you go for that? Just think of John. He had been up the Mount of Transfiguration with Jesus when Jesus was transformed. He had seen Jesus transformed. He had seen Jesus broken on the cross. He had had this revelation. Please stay with these words just for another 2 minutes. He had the Isaiah 52, 53 revelation of Jesus. Many were appalled at him. It speaks of Jesus in Isaiah 52. It says, many were appalled at him. His appearance was so disfigured. This is talking about Jesus on the cross. His appearance was so disfigured beyond that of any man. His form marred beyond human recognition. And John had seen that. He said of Jesus, Isaiah says, he had no beauty or majesty to attract us into him. Nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, familiar with suffering, like one from whom men hide their faces. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. He had seen that picture of Jesus. He had seen a picture of Jesus where it wasn't a golden sash, it was a crown of thorns. He had seen a picture of Jesus where it wasn't these bronze, strong feet, but a man stumbling under the weight of the cross. He had seen this picture of Jesus where it wasn't a long robe, but it was a bloodied robe. He had seen this picture of Jesus where it wasn't flames in his eyes, but death in his eyes. He had seen this picture of Jesus where it wasn't a happy face, it was a broken, wrecked face. God takes him into something else. And he sees another picture of Jesus at the age of 95. And that revelation of Jesus reduces him to fall on the ground like he's dead. Can we stand?